Therapy Geeks, a podcast by Luke McGibbon and Louise Taylor.
Hello,
Hello.
welcome to Therapy Geeks episode X.
4.
Oh, okay, I couldn't quite remember. Submit for X. We've decided, since I think last week's themed episode went so well, we're just going to do that again. So this week's theme is the relationship, or the therapeutic relationship, or all relationships.
Relationships.
To relate. What's your initial thoughts, Louise?
My initial thoughts about relationships. Oh man,
Man.
hard work, baby.
All relationships, or just well?
No, they can't. I suppose that's a bit harsh, isn't it? I suppose
well,
immediately.
Something you can work on, isn't it?
Yeah. They're not
easy.
easy always.
No, definitely not. There's a element of sweet and sour, isn't there, in all relationships?
Yeah.
Do you know, like, for all... Okay, I think... Well, I'm just moving the mic a little. But I think for all the discussion about modalities, like person-centered stuff and CBT and Gestalt and all that, there's often an adage that's repeated throughout counselling education that it's the relationship that heals, it's not the modality. And there is some evidence backing this, saying that, like, the quality of a relationship is far more important than what you do with a client. That's what's more likely to produce good outcomes. I think they call it the dodo bird verdict, because it's something to do with Alice in Wonderland. There's like a bit where a dodo bird wins a race or something and says, "No, you all win." I can't remember.
We do all win.
Okay, yeah, I guess we do. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to sort of plant your flag in, like, I'm a psychodynamic counsellor. That's what I'm all about. But you know, it does us no good to have a bit of to have tribalism in therapy, really.
And that's why I suppose the integrated model is brilliant.
Oh yeah. I think to be consistent in theory, but eclectic in technique. That's like integrative, isn't it? Right, like to have a theory of have a consistent theory of what makes people happy or sad, but to treat someone with what they need at that time.
Yeah. And I suppose we were talking about relationships and saying relationships can't be easy, but also relationships are brilliant.
Yes.
And they can be brilliant. And the relationship in the therapeutic relationship, like, how do you know if it's a good one?
Oh, that is a good question, isn't it? I mean, I guess it comes down to a felt sense. Do you feel understood?
Yes.
Do you look forward to seeing your therapist? Should you look forward to seeing your therapist?
This is brilliant, because this is the thing. Like, should you? Like, how should it feel? How do you know if it's working? How do you know if it's not? And all I can think of, that's entirely up to the client.
Yes.
It's always up to the client whether it's useful or not.
Yeah.
And at the end of any session, I would always say to my clients, only come if you find it useful or beneficial. You know, because I can reflect on the relationships I've had with my therapist and what worked for me.
Right, which is another reason that personal therapy is so good for counselling students, isn't it? That we have to go through it so we get an idea of what it's like to be on the other side of the chair, so to speak.
Yes.
I guess what you're saying raises another big rhetorical-ish question as well, which is like, how would you measure your success as a counsellor with a client? Like, is it, you know, and this is something that's hotly debated all the time, like, is it about behaviour change? Like, is it about mood change? Is it about being closer to feelings, or maybe even a change of personality, if that's what's required? Like, if when you're a client, what sessions do you leave feeling like that was useful?
So what was sessions? But then I don't know, because there would be some sessions I would leave thinking, wow, I feel a lot of the time I would have left feeling like a weight was lifted, particularly the therapist I saw during my training. Found her very good and left feeling lighter, I suppose.
Excellent.
Like, you'd offloaded and you'd gone okay, and you'd ruminated, or you'd discard, you know. But some actually I would have left maybe feeling like, oh damn. And that's something I reflected on. If you probe a client, well, you decide, well, so say you decide, oh, they've said that, maybe that's worth investigating, right? And you will have some therapists who behave. What if they're not really that interested and they don't really want to go there? And if it's a wound, sometimes sticking your finger in it isn't actually going to help it heal.
No, yeah, exactly. Like I guess it's down to therapist discretion. Like, of course, there's times whenever we don't talk about something because we are avoiding it, and we shouldn't avoid it. But there's also plenty of times where you're avoiding it, and it's for a good reason. And you need to build up strength and a sense of safety, and maybe work around other things in your life before you get to this big, gaping hole in your stomach. I guess, what you're saying is, and that there's times whenever you feel, well, I guess a weight's being lifted. So I guess it seems to me that that'd be like a person-centered measurement of success, where you feel like you've got something off your chest and it's been connected. So to you, a good quality therapeutic relationship is about connection. This is I obviously agree with myself.
Yeah.
Of course I would.
Yeah, but you see, right, so there's a lot of therapies about. So we're there's a lot of different therapies emerging, alternative therapies, and counselling could still very much be argued to be on the edges. It's not fully embraced in mainstream. It is more mainstream. But so I went to a therapy which is called cellular memory.
Oh yeah, I heard about that somewhere. Yeah,
cellular memory. And it was an experience. But actually reflecting on it, I feel I might have come out of it slightly traumatized.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying they were bad at their job, but there were things that I wasn't aware of that were brought to my attention, which then were planted in my consciousness, which then made me feel quite distressed.
Wow. Right. Okay.
So I was like, oh my goodness, is that happening? I had no, and that, I suppose it was quite aggressively thrust to my attention, and therefore it was quite distressing to come to terms with that. Now, that's a form of therapy.
Yeah.
Now, they could argue that initial distress, that initial trauma, that initial discomfort is actually part of the healing process.
Sure.
I would argue it's unnecessary pain, possibly. I'm grateful for the experience, but it's not for me now, I've come to learn. But do you think that so there was a deep trust for that therapist? She was highly qualified. She was actually good at what she did. However, and I've completely trusted, but it was actually quite a traumatic experience. I
guess, the image that kept popping into my head when you were telling me this story is about the metaphor that a lot of people use, and it may sound a cliche, but about therapy being like about walking alongside someone, not leading the way. And it sounds to me like that was an experience of being led, and you it sounds like you weren't quite ready for it yet, or maybe you'd never be ready for it. Maybe you were perfectly fine the way you were, and that's not really up to a therapist to decide what you're ready for, really, is it?
And that's it. I do think that there are therapists who are telling clients they know best. Right. Whereas I'm always saying, you know best.
We were talking about this a minute ago before we started as well, isn't it? And it's a remnant of some outdated ideas. So I guess this is a good place to start on the history of the therapeutic relationship. I did quote.
I'll
bunny
leave
ears
that
there.
to
Did
you.
quote marks. We've got it all in my hand. I got a little timeline. No, I can't just give it all in one gob. It's quite long. But well, okay. So around with Freud, right? Around the original, the OG of therapy. The relationship was considerably different than what you'd imagine therapy to be now. So that old image of somebody like lying back on a chaise lounge, on a big sofa or something, and the doctor's behind them because, Freud believed that in therapy the therapist must be a tabula rasa, or a blank slate. So a Freudian psychoanalyst would hardly say anything. Basically, he would sit there with a pen and paper behind you, so you can't see him. If he's out of your sight, then he's not interfering with the natural process that's happening. And he would just say, just talk, just say whatever comes into your head, and then say whatever comes in to connect with that. Basically, something called free association. Just say something and say what connects to that, and say what connects to that, and what connects to that. And then, gradually the therapist is taking sort of notes saying, what is he not talking about, for example? So that's where there may be defense mechanisms in front of something, when does he change the subject, and what does he associate with what? So if someone's talking about their father, then they start shifting to talking about maybe a war. Like that says to me that there's something about your father that makes you think of war. There's something association, but there wasn't much of a relationship, so to speak, and it was actually quite cold. Just imagine sitting, being vulnerable, and baring your soul for an hour, and then this person who you've not even looked at for the last hour suddenly goes, "Yes, you want to fuck your mother," whatever it was.
Oh, that's Freud. Everybody wants to fuck their parents. Like, it's ridiculous. Well, no, it's not. I shouldn't be. How rude was I about Freud? I feel bad.
No, well, no. I mean, this is the thing with Freud is that Freud, and the start of the sentence is going to sound weird, but the end will justify it, right? So Freud had a lot of good ideas, right? But those good ideas have been absorbed into society and kind of taken for granted now. Like, no one was talking about the unconscious. Well, it was known, but no one was talking about working with it in a therapeutic manner, or that there could be ingrained habits or traumas that are behind things. And treatment of hysteria and basically the invention of the talking cure. That was all Freud. But then, like, since that's been absorbed and taken for granted by society as a given, like, all the people remember about Freud are the stupid ideas which deserve to be dismissed. So, for example, like, right, trauma and hysteria. Freud was a pioneer of hysteria treatment. So they used to call it, I can't remember, it was like dementia precox. That's what they used to call schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
And he realized that in the back history of a lot of women who were hysterical, there was like sexual abuse, and so he started to treat hysteria by getting people to talk about sexual abuse, and oftentimes it would like work. But the thing is, right, as Freud went on, he found so many women who had been sexually abused that, like, it was a very repressed time back then. It was the therapy of its time. It was Vienna, repressed Vienna, and nobody really talked about sex. So he started discovering that many people who had traumatized sexual histories that he started to doubt whether they'd all actually had sexual trauma. I mean, of course, we know now in society how common rape and molestation is, that they probably were all sexually traumatized, but he started to have doubts because he was like, I can't imagine everybody's doing this. So he started to formulate one of his more stupid ideas, which is about the elector complex, that like women secretly want to buck their dads and all that stuff, and like they obviously they don't. I think it was just how he justified that many people getting sexually abused because he just didn't believe it after a while. Was that common?
And that thing is, see, with the idea like that, the idea of consent is quite actually new.
Yeah, well, yeah,
you could not be tried for rape and marriage until 1992 in the UK.
Like, I was one, in 92, like
I was 14.
Crazy.
So it was actually not something that could be tried in a court of law. In this, so the idea of rape and marriage was, it was like it's impossible because you're married, therefore he owns you.
Yeah, it's not like a contract where it's like permanently fuck me when you want.
Yes, but that was actually that was deeply embedded in the culture and the societies.
Yeah.
But and the legal system sure didn't come until 1992.
That's a very unequal relationship, isn't it? Speaking of relationships.
Yeah. So I suppose you look at I love your history of therapy. So we got to Freud.
Helps me learn it, to be honest, because the whole soap opera drama of the history of therapy helps me learn the theories, because it's, I don't know, it comes part and parcel with like things like that, like Jung and mysticism and all that stuff, and his kooky ideas. Yeah, I find particularly fascinating.
But I was at I don't know if it was a suicide initiative, and did I say this in the last one? I think so. I repeat myself. You tell me.
Yeah, repeat yourself. It's fine.
Basically, I said that no matter what my qualifications are, no matter how much I have learnt in any college or anywhere, the best thing I can do for any client is care.
Yeah.
Do you see? And be compassionate. and care. Now, how do you know that you're cared for in the therapeutic relationship? How would you know?
Ooh. Here's a big one for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fucking interrupt me. Like my therapist, I got so mad at my therapist because he interrupted me.
Yes.
But then, you know, then I look at myself and I'm like, I do that all the time in conversation, and people do that all the time to me in conversation, and I don't seem to feel any difficulty there. I just sort of accept it, and you maneuver. But in therapy, it's like, give me a moment to be vulnerable and explore this myself, and then when I'm done, and in your 2 cents. And I'm as guilty as anyone of doing that, I think, sometimes, but I need to remember that.
But you see, right? So do you think that him interrupting you was the absence of care?
I don't know. But I think it's an absence of. No, I was going to use the word regard, but that, I guess that is care. I think it's perhaps the therapist is highly educated. Like, he's got 1 million master's degrees and all that. And I think sometimes when you've got that much book learning behind you, there's the urge to just leap in and go, is this? I didn't like that very much. I think that would, whenever I stop attending personal therapy for long periods of time, it's usually because I've had a session like that. It really puts me off for a long time.
Yes.
But of course, you know, the advice that I would give to somebody else telling me this is, well, you have to take that to therapy yourself. You have to tell the therapist that.
There
and
we
work
go.
with that.
Yes, and would you feel comfortable saying to, because it would, the ideal relationship would be because in the therapy room you saying, actually, you just interrupted me and it has annoyed me.
Yeah.
But can we do that?
Could be powerful, couldn't it? Like,
that would be powerful, because how he responds, how you respond, that's where the learning is.
yes.
But how many clients feel that they can talk to therapists in that level? Because I am an imperfect human being.
Yeah, yeah.
And I hope that my clients know that I care.
Uh-huh.
But I might annoy the shit out of them at times.
Of course, yeah.
You know, but in the therapeutic relationship, it would be great if they could explore that.
Yeah. How do you give someone the space where they feel like safe enough to criticize you? I mean, that's a big question. Like, I've heard a few different answers, really, but I mean, generally, I just keep reassuring them every now and again that feel free to tell me if this is doing nothing for you. Like,
yes.
And you know,
but most people would just not come back.
Yeah, and I think they would. Yeah, because it's terrifying. I did tell my therapist that I was annoyed at him interrupting me once, and I just don't think it got through. I think it was because he said he'd sensed something was a bit off about the last session. I was like, yeah, I was uncomfortable that you interrupted me. And he went, see, I thought so. And I was like,
well done me, I noticed, rather than actually listening to what you just communicated.
Right, which I think was probably just a defensive behaviour as well. It's just to sort of, you know, to go, oh, right, you know, rather than go, my bad, you know. But I feel like I need to bring it up again, because the session later there was more interruption. And yeah, I think though, to answer a question from earlier about what is a successful session, for me it's when I leave feeling better, or when I leave knowing that there's something I can do or have to do now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so I'm pro homework at the minute.
Oh, so am I.
But yeah, but like, so sometimes I imagine you're the same. But I whenever I hear about homework, I imagine like CBT style, which is like, go home and fill in this form and stuff, which is great, probably for many actually, but not for me. Like I kind of like person-centered homeworks, which is like, go home and reflect on this.
Yes.
Or you know what I did recently, and I told someone to go and watch the YouTube TED Talk of, you know, Brené Brown one, The Power of Vulnerability.
Oh.
And yeah, like, just like, I don't know, silly little things, but
yeah, but it's not like a case of if you don't do it, there will be repercussion.
Yes,
it's a case of this might be beneficial, because I thought of this recently, and this might be the biggest bullshit analogy you've ever heard, but I liked it. What it was is, I see the sessions like bouncing on a trampoline, and the session is when you touch the trampoline, and all the work is when you leave. Like, so the session is that moment of contact. Yeah. And the fun is outside of the room, when you start exploring, when you start looking at yourself. and you start seeing the world differently. And that's the way I say this is like the tiniest bit of work.
Yeah.
The rest is
I like
outside.
the idea that it's safe as well, because that trampoline's this thin but strong thing protecting you from the hard ground as well, just as you go down.
Love it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, you wouldn't get that with a silent psychoanalyst, but I mean, I didn't justify it enough. The justification they use is that if you're a blank slate, then the client's likely to project things on you, and you can analyze that, and you can analyze the sort of transference that happens, which we'll get to later in the episode.
That's transference does my head in a bit, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because do you believe that it's always there, right? So transference is that are you transferring a relationship that you've got with somebody else on me? Is that what you're doing at this point? Because that's what transference is basically saying.
Right.
You're always
always
transferring a relationship with somebody else onto your therapist.
Right. It's an outdated map based.
I don't believe that fully. I think that you can connect with the person in the room completely.
I think it's not. I'm not so keen on that on that old definition. Definitely of transference, that like it's this outdated map of like a parental relationship that you're projecting into a current person or whatever. I don't know, but I think that it should be treated as something unconscious that a person can do that can affect all their relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be a parent or an old relationship. I just think there's an unconscious habit that people have. Like, so there's a client who told me that they have a parent who's actually really competitive with them now that they're an adult, and they don't like it very much. And then at the end of the session, sometimes I'll just ask just to do small talk, just to wind down and make them feel normal after a dense chat, you know. So I'll just talk about something that's been on TV or something that I've watched recently. And what was it? I said something about it was a while ago. It was something like, I don't know, I'm gonna make up a film like, oh, The Notebook. I was like, oh yeah, I saw The Notebook yesterday, and he was like, oh yeah, I cried at The Notebook. And I said, oh no, I cry at everything. I cried at Man of Steel, which is like a Superman film, you know. And he's like, what's Man of Steel? And I was like, oh, it's Superman. And this client said, oh, I only like films that make you think. And I was like, you're very subtly trying to do a competition thing with me now.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And then in another session, they mentioned a past therapist they had in quite glowing terms, and they're like, yeah, whenever I went to this last therapist with my problems, it always seemed to work out really well. I was like, you don't even notice you're doing this, but it's like you're initiating a competitive behavior. I'm not saying your parents' competitive behavior is all your fault, but I'm saying that a lot of problems in life, no, not a lot of problems, a lot of things, good and bad in life, are not just created but co-created. There's a quiet partnership, and like I think that's what transference can be.
Yeah, and see, that's great, because it's definitely like there are things that I was aware of in therapy that I was doing. Well, I became aware of. I wasn't aware when I initially went in.
Yes,
but through reflection, and that's why I love like subtly reflecting words that people are saying can be very powerful, because you're not always aware of what you're communicating.
Yes.
Because it's just you're like, this is normal.
Yes.
This is the way life is, and they're wrong and I'm right. And I think that's why, I don't know, when you become aware of actually what you're bringing into relationships and how you're behaving and how that could be impacting the way that you're connecting with the world, the way you're connecting with your nearest and dearest, and it can bring a clarity, I suppose. Like we were talking earlier, like my strong personality can be like I have a strong personality. For years I was trying to dumb it down or do something, but I couldn't. It's there. It's like, so to be aware of that, I had to be aware of how that might impact clients.
Yeah. But
also the most significant learning was how that impacted other people in my family. It intimidated them, even if my intention was not to intimidate.
Right. Wow.
Because I was somebody with a strong personality who said what they thought. And for a lot of people, that's not comfortable.
That's their counter-transference, I suppose. Oh, no, well, counter-transference is from the therapist to the client, but I suppose, so it's their transference from you is Wait, I've mixed myself up a bit. But they unconsciously perceive strength and assertion as dominance
and aggression.
and aggression. Yeah.
So whenever sometimes to some people you saying I do not agree with you is in their eyes an aggressive act.
Yes, I think that's completely well, because people treat ideas and concepts and maybe even political views as badges of identity, and a challenge to that is a challenge to them.
Their sense of self,
their
sense of identity. It's actually seen as a very large attack on them.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, it's okay for us not to agree. It's okay for us not to share the same beliefs.
Yeah, completely.
But that's the so Maslow would talk about a self-actualized person would be aware that we're all different. Whereas actually you're dealing with a lot of traumatized people.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a lot of people who see the slightest disagreement as an aggressive act.
Yes.
So when you are in dealing with vulnerable people who are coming to you because they've maybe suffered trauma, it is incredibly important with me with a strong personality to be mindful that my personality. So we are supposed to be a blank slate, but we're not. So
we're not.
We've moved on from that.
Give up on that.
Yeah. So it's important for me, and that's my responsibility. So I'm like, I said before, I would say I'm quite I'm a very, I'm not for everybody, Marmite kind of therapist.
Yeah.
But for the right people, and I would let them know this is what I'm like, and I would be very mindful and be very gentle. But to be aware when you're dealing with people who are traumatized or going through something, gentle, because a slight or when you're very vulnerable, somebody, a slight challenge, and we talked about challenges in episode 1.
Yeah.
A slight challenge could be taken as an aggressive act.
It can really send you flying. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know what I've discovered recently about challenge is you can get away with quite a bit with challenge if you introduce it. If you go, I'm just gonna challenge you on that.
Yes.
Like before you actually do it, rather than go, well, do you think that's the case? Right? Rather than instead of going, really? Do you think that's true? Or you go,
yeah.
I'm gonna challenge that there. Like, what do you think of that? Do you think like that was a such and such or whatever?
Yeah.
You know, like I think if you give people that, if you get their permission by saying that, it's you really get away with a little more.
Absolutely.
Get away with it is the wrong phrase because it's like a trick. Feels like a trick. It's not a trick.
And you see with the other thing you see with relationships, right? We have choices about who we are in relationships with. Does that so we particularly have that choice in therapy. Walk, use your feet, don't go if you don't feel comfortable. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
But also maybe explore the discomfort. Is this me? Is this or is this not working? Because it's okay not to go back. And that's one of the reasons there was one supervisor who I wanted to go, and I think this is who I wanted to meet to see if I wanted to be supervised by them. And I drove I drive like an hour and a half to see my supervisor who I love. But before I came across him, I looked for somebody who was in psychosynthesis, that kind of training. And I was like,
yeah, I like that. I like that model as well. It's quite good.
Right. So I wanted to meet. So I wanted to meet, and I wanted to see if we would, within 10 minutes, the contract was out, £65 an hour and a half, she was telling me. I had to sign a 6-month contract. She was but it didn't feel right. And I was like, now she's very, very well educated, all this. I think she's good at it, but it didn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
Sometimes your gut's got it's got a...
Yeah, but it took a lot for me to actually turn around. And what I said was, I will pay, because I ended up, I said when I was signing the contract, this doesn't feel right, because I don't know you. She's like, oh, well, we'll work that out. But actually after it, I really thought, no, that's not what I want from supervision. I need to feel really comfortable. I need to feel like really heard and valued. And actually, whenever I was saying to her, this doesn't feel right, I don't know you, how can I say that I want to work with you? That was the whole point of us meeting. Then she did take that on board, actually. And then I had said, look, we booked, but then I contacted her and said, look, I'll pay you whatever money, but I'm not going to be doing this. And she was like, oh, right, thank you for letting me know. What was it? And I said, I think you're really good at your job, but you're not for me. Now, that's okay.
Yeah, and in fact, she probably got something from that, like, because you were able to be honest and say, what about it didn't work? At the very least, you've probably given her some solace, knowing that it wasn't necessarily, like, something she did.
No,
Do you know what I
think
mean?
she is good at her job, but
Yeah.
she wasn't for me.
Yeah. I know, that's what I'm saying. It's better than not showing up at all and
Yeah.
just going, okay. Like, it's guess what we're saying earlier about exploring things that you're uncomfortable about and communicating them well with your therapist leads to something richer and deeper.
Yes. Well, you see, I think she was like that. Really, she was very efficient,
Aye.
very like the contract, all that. Whereas I see counselling as vocational.
Mm-hmm.
I know this, and this is where I've got. It is it's more vocation to. It's a vocational thing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like people with this is my career, my job. I would say if you're counselling for 30 hours a week, I couldn't counsel for 30 hours a week.
Mm.
I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a lot of the counselling, they're counselling a lot big, if they're employed full time as a counsellor, that they're counselling large numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I counsel a few. Small number, which I really, really like because it means I can completely connect and I can completely be there.
Yeah.
Now, if I was, right, okay, we'll take it down from 30 to 20, even 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd burn out quite quick.
Yeah, and I think we should probably do a whole episode on burnout. I feel like there's a lot to be said about it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's just not just exhausting emotionally, but even just remembering things.
Yes.
Like, the relationships, in my opinion, like, I feel the most connected to a therapist when I remember a little thing, like a name of someone that I haven't brought up in therapy in a long time, or who somebody is. So, like, I always make a real effort to remember. And this is particularly important with teenagers because half the stuff teenagers bring to you is this complex, connected social web of he said, she said, and, if you can remember the bits and pieces and the nuances of it, suddenly you're like, here we are, we're in the moment, like, because it's just, I don't think they expect you to. No, I don't think anyone really expects you to remember all the bits and pieces.
Yes, but I have they've also, like, and I would remember quite a lot about what clients said, but I've also made a mistake of getting, let's say somebody is feeling vulnerable. I've made the mistake of saying a name wrong or something like that, like a child's name or something like that, and I've used it. And that can actually be quite, and I've apologized. I've said, they've corrected me, and I've said, oh, sorry, I thought, sorry about that.
Yeah,
but that can actually be quite, I could see the client was disappointed in me that I got the name wrong, like,
yeah,
because we had a connection, and they're like kind of looking at me like, I thought you knew me better.
Yeah.
You don't care.
I think in the back of a lot of clients' minds is the knowledge that, you see a lot of people, but they secretly hope that you remember everything. They don't expect it, but they hope it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it.
But that was a mistake that I could make with a friend, with anybody. I could mess up a name in any situation. Like, sure, I call my daughters every name. I'm like, who are you? Which one? Dog names, everything. Do you know? Oh, I can call Lily. But in that situation, that little name actually impacted the client because they took it as I just got that feeling that they didn't feel cared for or valued. Now, I suppose that's important with the relationship. How, if there is a moment, so your interruptions where you didn't feel valued, how can you come back from that? Or is there any point in trying to?
I don't know. I mean, that is the question, isn't it? Like, I think there probably is something valuable in that. I think it just takes some clout, it takes some bravery, and it takes the right atmosphere to be able to bring it up. And I guess it depends on the relationship you have with your therapist. If you're too chummy, that's the problem, If you're too chummy, you don't want to hurt your friend's feelings, rather than like, oh, actually, I pay my friend to listen to me. So
yeah, but would you tell your friend? Would you say to your friends what you really think?
I think I would as I get older. Yeah, I think I've become more authentic. But like, I understand people who wouldn't.
Yes,
I think that exchanging truth is good for you.
It is.
I think being authentic is good for you.
Yes, but then being aware that your truth is maybe not necessarily, you know what I mean?
Right.
This is how I see it. So it's like, I feel, I own, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm not God.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying like, you did this, so therefore that means you're a...
Yeah.
When that happened, I didn't like it.
Yes. Right. And that's, Have you heard of nonviolent communication?
Yes, I've definitely. I think I did. I think I was trained in it when I was working at probation.
Because what you just said there is basically it, actually, which I fucking love it. It's by a guy called Marshall Rosenberg who trained a bit with Carl Rogers, apparently. But then, I would say if I wanted to sell a course. But so he gives a formula for basically airing a grievance in a way that is more likely to get something through and less likely to just start an argument. So I think it's observation, feeling, need, request. So a perfect example I have is actually recently I felt like somebody in one of the many jobs that I have, I'm saying that to increase the chances of their anonymity. I felt that they were micromanaging me, and this is not someone who has the right to, because they're not like they're not the team leader or anything, like, or the admin or whatever. They're just a person in the same sort of rank as me, and so I have this annoying habit where I don't actually realize something pisses me off until about 3 or 4 hours later, and I'm driving and I'm like, wait a second, fuck you.
And then I should have said.
Oh, I get so mad. So, but I'm like, that's fine as long as I'm aware of it. I can bring it back. So, luckily, actually, in this current job, oh god, it's getting less anonymous. In this job, there's some shifts which are split, so I'll be working 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m.
And his name is Adam. That's where we're going.
They're not even going to listen anyway. It's fine. And they're my friends, sure, so I can. They know I'm their friend anyway. But so some jobs in this shift, or some shifts in this job, you can be working 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Right? So there's like a weird 5-hour break in the middle of a full day of work.
Oh, that's annoying.
Well, I don't know. It grows on you.
Oh, does it? Oh, that's good.
Well, it has to, or else you just leave. So luckily though, that's a day that's structured for people who don't realize they're angry immediately, like me. That's perfect. It's like something happens in the morning that pisses me off, and then like during the break, I'm like, oh, that pissed me off, and I'm back 2 hours later. I'm like, what you did in the morning pissed me off. I get the full. It's tailor-made for someone who is not always in touch with their anger the way they should be, like me. But so the example is observation, feeling, need, request. XYZ. Whenever you stood up and walked over during the meeting to make sure I was typing the right thing on the computer, I felt pressured and tense. I need to feel like you can trust me and respect me to do my job, as I have done in the 5 years before you worked here. That's not what I said. That was what I wanted. That's the bit. That's a violent bit. That's a violent bit. I just added that last bit. So when you do this, when I see you do this, I feel tense and pressured. I need to feel like you can trust me to do this job. Could you please not do that in the future, or if you feel like there's something that needs revised, just email it to me after. But just so like that's the observation. They can't argue with what I've seen, or what I'm seeing happening. Especially if you get a really specific behavior, you don't say when you micromanage me, because that's not specific. You have to get like an incredibly specific behavior that isn't labeling a person. So instead of when you micromanage me, it's when you stand up during the meeting and walk over to make sure I'm writing the right thing in the computer. Like that's she can't argue she did that. And she can't argue how I feel. You can't tell me how I feel. I know how I feel. So that's the first two things are inarguable, and they're not blaming. They're not really blaming. There's blaming as little as possible, because they're saying when you do this, I feel this. Not you do this to make me feel this. And you make a need. You say this is how this kind of violates what I need to feel comfortable and secure. And is there any way we can do something else? That's a request.
Yes. But right, so
Uh-huh.
that's all beautiful.
It is.
So you're trained.
It's
you're
hard to
informed,
practice.
You're ready. Yeah, because what happens when they go, what the fuck?
What happens when I don't have a 5-hour break to prepare?
And they go, I didn't do that.
speech.
I didn't do that. And then they could turn. So say I love that,
Uh-huh.
but you're but you've got to not expect anything. In
Oh no, of course. No, it's in the book even of it, the bit I'm reading right now because I haven't finished it is it's about the difference between a demand and a request.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a demand is you're holding something hostage, even if it's your feelings. Even if it's like, if you don't do this, I'll be pissed. That's a demand. It's just like, could you please do this? And like, there's no consequence if they don't do it. Or
yes,
something.
that's it. And you see, right? So we're looking at relationships. I think, again, you can look at relationships. You can look at every relationship you've got. You can look at the therapeutic relationship. Right. When do you know a relationship should end? When do you know? And this is one thing that I know most of the therapists and supervisors did not make it easy for the relationship to end. And relationships with therapy is not, I don't think it should be a lifelong relationship.
No.
So it's a season relationship.
No.
It's a season, reason, lifetime people in your life. So it's a relationship. And it should be possibly a season or reason, right? How I try, and I possibly maybe make it to the point where I'm like, it might feel to some that I'm pushing them out. Because what I want to do is make them feel as comfortable as possible ending the relationship when they so choose.
Yeah.
Because that was not my experience. I had one therapist who I was trying to end the relationship with. And one of the reasons I just didn't want to see him anymore, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. This was I think my first counsellor in my early 20s. And so he was like, why? Right? And I was like, oh, because financial. It wasn't true, but that was what I pulled out of the air. He said, okay, I'll do it for free.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Whew. I mean, I worry about that on its own, let alone.
He was a very kind man.
Yeah.
He was a very good man, but I did want to end the relationship. But I don't know. And that's why possibly with my clients, I'm like, you only come if you feel it's beneficial. You only come if you do not have to see me. You will not hurt my feelings if you don't want to see me anymore.
Yes. I think it's important to stress counsellor resilience because that's what makes people feel comfortable criticizing you, which you need them to be. You know, like if you say, if you would rather see like a female counsellor instead of a male counsellor, it's something I have to say a lot because some people just do. Then it's fine. My feelings will not be hurt.
But he did offer for free.
Right. Well, you've been forced into a place where you have to be completely honest with him. Then, or did you just say nah?
No, I can't remember. But I didn't go back. But I had been seeing him, I think, for a year.
I wonder if that was a little challenge, in a way, like a subtle challenge. Like maybe he knew, so he was trying to push you into saying, I just
possibly.
I don't know.
He was I just didn't feel comfortable anymore. There was a lot going on, and I find it was like, but I was in my early 20s then. I'm very different to how I am now, so I wouldn't have been. I felt maybe I would have maybe not felt comfortable asserting myself in that way.
Oh, right.
Saying, actually, I don't like it anymore, or I don't feel like. I would have tried to come up with an excuse because that's where I was at that point. But, that's okay. So it's like, okay, that's fine. I think maybe for me, maybe he is challenging me, but maybe if it was me now, I'd be like, my complete is full client autonomy. So he was psychoanalysis, I think. So full client autonomy. So if a client says, I don't want to see you again, I'd leave it there. I wouldn't challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a hard enough thing to admit to not to see somebody that you don't want to see anyone.
Yes, and that's why endings in relationships and my experience of ending relationships with therapists and stuff and with clients too, I try and make them feel they're in complete control. Well, in private practice, they've got to be.
Yeah.
It's a bit different whenever it's in the doctor's surgery or whatever, because they're with private practice, it's a service they're paying for. Whereas whenever it was free, they were like, I'm entitled to this, so therefore I'm going to use, maybe they're a bit more like, I'm going to use all the 6 sessions. Whereas I think there's a different mentality when they're paying for it.
Oh yeah, completely. It's like anything, even like in comedy. Like if you have a free comedy night, it's generally going to be really hard work. Whereas if you get people to even pay like £1 at the door, suddenly, like, oh well, I've paid in, I've invested.
But then I have a problem with the amount with the people expecting therapy for free. They're not valuing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel probably more valued in private practice than I did whenever.
Yeah, I would say the same. Sorry, I interrupted you
No,
there.
you didn't. You didn't.
It was my. I guess I'm just projecting when I don't like being interrupted.
Oh.
I guess there is a thin tightrope because I kind of agree with you. Like that, like in private practice, you'd never get someone forgetting a session the way you do in free counselling. Like somebody just doesn't show up and you call them and they go, "Oh yeah, sorry, I just forgot," or like, "Oh, I was in work and I got out a bit late. Sorry." Like if it was a paid session, they would have called the minute they knew, probably in the hopes of not having to owe me 30 quid.
And sometimes free stuff is not good.
Yeah. However, though, we do have to be accessible for people who. But I can't think of an in between. Do you know what I mean?
Pay what you feel, pay what you can. That's what I
I
am.
like that. Yeah, I like
and
that.
also my supervisor, he was paid with a bird box.
I like that.
You know,
yeah.
There's always a way. I'm like, don't let money be the reason. But I'll tell you, we always work it out. We always whatever everybody's happy, everybody feels comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think there's an expectation, like the way the relationship is treated, the value. Like it would be, say if somebody paid me with a poem.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
Well, depends on the quality of the poem.
Well, but who am I to judge the quality? You know what I mean? Or like they said thank you, or do you know what I mean? Like, or they give me a book. You know, there's always a way. Like,
I love a good book.
Yes,
Yeah.
But I suppose everybody's maybe fixated with money.
Well, yeah, I think that is definitely something, isn't it? Like,
you need it. I know.
Yes, but it's it shouldn't stand in the way of mental health.
No. No,
it shouldn't really stand in the way of anything.
Well, you look also at the likes of Nexus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brilliant charity,
mm-hmm.
but how many sessions can they offer?
I don't actually know the
6.
6?
Right, they're dealing with
severe sexual trauma.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got 6 sessions. We got to get this wrapped up in 6 sessions.
God.
It can be argued that that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
That's actually not incredibly beneficial.
Yeah.
And it could potentially be damaging.
I think, time limits can certainly damage the relationship. I mean, what I currently do in my placement is, because we're given quite a bit of autonomy, is say, we're going to do 6 sessions and then reassess, basically, just see where we are.
Yes.
Ground things a bit and then...
And cruise?
Then
Sorry,
cruise.
I
Do cruise do that
interrupted
too?
you.
No. All we've done is make each other painfully aware of the. I think it's just in therapy. I don't like being interrupted because I don't seem to mind in normal conversation. I don't seem to mind doing it either in normal conversation.
Do you know I have a really annoying habit of getting overexcited.
No, it's fine.
In conversations or anything.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I've got something to say."
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, wait, you impatient wench." But I can't. I could say, what are we now?
We're 50 minutes in. Oh, in the history or?
well, the relationship. I think the relationship heals.
Aye.
The relationship's very, in my opinion, the client's in control.
Yeah.
The client should be in control, and the client is the expert, and the client calls the shots.
I think the jury in some ways is still out because it's been moving for centuries. So even we were talking about psychoanalysis earlier, like when it came to Adler was the first person who stressed equality in the therapeutic relationship. So he was like one of Freud's disciples, but he sort of moved it in his own direction, the same way Jung did as well. But they're both sidesteps, I think. But Adler focused a lot on like power dynamics, and he thought that's what people a drive that people have. But in therapy, it's quite similar to CBT because it was focusing a lot on like the internal logic that people use to justify certain neuroses and things like that. But instead of having them lie back on a chair and him be behind them, it was seen as quite revolutionary that he sat in one chair, the patient had an identical chair, they were facing each other, and like it's sort of, I don't know, Adler's one of those people who like did quite a lot that laid the foundations for a lot of other different kinds of therapies, but he doesn't get any credit. Like that relationship of equality surely must have influenced the likes of Carl Rogers or something, and the thing about internal logic is clearly an influencer of CBT, if you ask me. And yeah, he was great. Like
He is, yeah. We see, like, I do think it's important, but then that's me projecting that's a very big part of my personality, being egalitarian, being equality.
yeah.
So that is going to impact the way that I view therapy and the way I am as a therapist. But clients will find that hard because they want to be led or they want to be informed.
Yeah,
So
some do, yeah.
Yeah. So there are times where they will want you to be directive.
Yes.
And so there will be a lot of clients asking me, what do you think I should do? Or where do I go now? If it's something with like anxiety, and I would have folders and I'd have information. So I'd say this information might be able to help you. If they ask me directly, right, I want help with this. And you will have that.
Yes.
And you've gone, well, what do you think? And they're like, oh, just shut up and tell me. You know, kind of thing.
Yeah,
so you'll be like, well, here's some information that might be of benefit.
Yeah, they want an insight.
Yeah, so that's not that's child-centered.
Client-centered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not giving them information and stuff because you're moving away from the idea that they are the X, because they're like, actually, no, I actually want help. It's not in my head.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I think the integrative is quite, because
you can move, you can flex. Sorry.
No.
Did it again.
We're so aware of it. We're going to stop talking.
I know. It's like if anyone ever says, I think it's it's kind of a clever little chess move that people do in conversation is go, oh, I really hate it when people do this, and then suddenly you're very aware of it every time you do that. Like, yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing, right? See, relationships,
Aye.
They're good, right? But
Yeah.
they're not as good. They're not as good as dreams.
Oh, hey,
did you like? Oh,
yeah, that was pretty good.
That was slick.
Yes. Can I get my phone?
Well,
It's somewhere-
yeah.
I've got my dream somewhere on the phone here.
So this is going to be interesting. Because I'm
the
having a go,
first-
aren't I?
I think so, if you want.
I think it's fair to say that I am not an expert in this field.
That's all right. You're allowed to make mistakes.
And I will.
Good. Here, well, I think I left my phone in your kitchen.
So I'm going to talk while you get the phone. Is that all right?
Yeah, talk about it.
So, look, so this is now a podcast where I'm not talking to Luke. Luke's gone easily after a solo podcast. So I suppose what we've covered so far is looking at the relationship, the therapeutic relationship, but the relationship in the therapy room is often argued to be a projection of the other relationships in your life, which I find quite, this is so odd that Luke's not here. I find that quite interesting that you can think about the relationship in the therapy room as like as indicative or symbolic of most of the relationships you have outside of it. I'm not entirely sure if I buy into that notion completely. Oh, it's there. Looks back in, and he's
right behind
and
you
he,
the whole time.
yeah.
Is there a metaphor about the relationship in what just happened?
Oh,
I don't know, probably. You'd have to really dig for it though.
they'd say what? Yeah, about you having to leave to get the phone and then it being just there,
right behind you the whole time. But you pointed it out. I don't
Well,
know.
I suppose that's you can't see the wood for the tree. No, that's not right.
There's probably something there. We'll come back to you.
We'll come back. Yeah.
Okay, so no, keep stalling because I have to get the app on my phone, which I used to log on my dreams.
See, do you think you have a relationship with dreams?
Yeah, I do. Well, because I guess that's all about having a relationship with your own unconscious, isn't it? And thus yourself in the Jungian manner. Anyway, it's all about kind of like a conversation that you have with your unconscious.
Mm-hmm. And what do you, I think, well, sure, I always talk, whenever I'm in schools and stuff, I always talk about the most important relationship you will ever have in your life.
Is with yourself.
It is.
And that's spot on. It's completely true.
Yeah. How do you know you have a good relationship with yourself?
I guess how you feel when you wake up, how you feel from your dream. Well, I'm still thinking of the unconscious. How do you know you have a good relationship with yourself? When you have a mistake and you don't really waste that much time with guilt or
Ooh.
blame, and you get to fixing it. I think is well, not necessarily get to fixing it. That's maybe too like pragmatic. I think it's there's a lot of stuff I've been reading recently about self-compassion. So it kind of ties into what we were saying about the child psychology last week about like you make a mistake, you are not the mistake. A mistake is something that you make, not that you are. So like so self-compassion is I guess didn't we talk about a car crash I was in? It was a car crash that was at least we'll say 45% my fault, and to yeah,
I like the way it's just under 50.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the other person, had 50.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Neither of us were great, to be honest. But we're fine. We're pals now.
That's so funny.
Brought buns to his house the day after, so he wouldn't make a claim.
You brought buns to his house?
Yeah.
Well,
had
I
lunch.
dropped it straight
We had
away.
lunch. And then he still filed a fucking claim.
And he took the buns.
Yeah, and he was fine as well.
No integrity.
He was
There's
not
no
sick.
integrity. You do not take buns
he's-
and file a claim.
He filed a claim for like whiplash, and I was like, "Mate, you're practically doing yoga in front of me yesterday. You're belling like."
How many people in this
Oh.
country have got whiplash because
yeah. Oh yeah, quick buck off some stranger. Like,
but we have compassion.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. It's just at the end of the day, it's just that's me trying to be compassionate. That's just the thing. No, well, self-compassion is right. Coming out of a car crash and going, I made a mistake, but yeah, and when you make a mistake that large, particularly when you're like in work or something, your urge is like to quit everything because you're like, I'm a liability around everyone. It's to be okay with yourself.
Yeah.
So I think it's different to self-esteem, which is like you're great no matter what, which is not healthy. It's more like, you're great with the capability of doing wrong.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that you can try not to do
Yes, but you're
anything
not
wrong.
encouraged to do that in a lot of jobs, in a lot of places. You're not encouraged to own that.
Yes.
You're encouraged to cover it up at all costs. And only portray yourself as a person who does not make mistakes.
Yeah. Okay.
Many jobs.
Yeah.
Public services, it's all about covering your ass. Like,
Yeah, it's completely. Do you think that's a form of self-compassion in a way?
covering your ass?
Yeah.
Covering your well, there
No,
you
I
go.
guess
That
not.
you're compassionate to yourself, but how compassionate is to the people who are suffering as a result of you covering your ass?
Yeah, I guess not that compassionate in general. That's more it's just saving your own skin, I suppose.
Yes, saving your own skin.
I guess, yeah, you could sum it up and just saying treat yourself the way you would treat a friend who comes to you with the same thing.
Yeah.
I've got some dreams here. Let's see. I've got a few. I'm trying to find one that's not ridiculous. Okay. So I'm gonna come up with a pseudonym for this person because she's a recurring character in my dreams.
Oh.
But she's also the very first girlfriend I ever had when I was from when I was 16 till I was like 20.
Oh wow.
And it's like a person I lost my virginity to and stuff.
Oh.
She got married about 5 days after I had this dream. I don't know if it's related. I wasn't quite aware when she was going to get married, to be honest, so I don't know if I knew. Maybe I did deep down. So we'll call her we'll call Patricia. Yeah, you come up with a pseudonym so I can't cannibalize her actual name. Okay, so Patricia sits with me in McDonald's. She shows me a 2p coin, but it has a strange symbol like an all-seeing eye on it. When I look closely, it has a picture of the Box nightclub and says Shine 2011. I say to her, I'm so into you. She shows me a video of her on a night out in the Box. I realize it's from after we broke up, so I stop watching as I feel it will sadden me. Oof.
What the fuck?
There's a lot there, isn't there? It's quite,
That's awesome, though.
sometimes I get these very like short dreams that are so dense with imagery that I don't quite know where to start.
Right, 2p coin.
2p coin with an all-seeing eye on it.
Well, this is all intuition. That's about wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, I would say
And
so.
the knowledge and the intuition that you, or the knowledge and the information that you gleaned in your relationship.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, about it being in the relationship with her, perhaps.
The relationship and and how you grew. Because
Okay.
you're very formative years, McDonald's youth. I always think young people, not a lot of money, and they eat there.
Yeah, I always make this joke about Patricia and I's relationship, which is that I learned to drive about a year before we broke up, and at the time, whenever I because I'd been able to procure a car, and I had a driving license, so we're like really excited. We were like, we're gonna travel, we're gonna go places, and we're gonna go all these places, and we often just ended up using it to go to the 24-hour McDonald's and just chat shit at 3 a.m.
So you did spend a lot of time at McDonald's.
Towards the end, yeah.
And then Shine 2011. So
We broke up in 2011 at the start.
Yes, that's what Shine.
Shine is the name of a club night that I've never been to. It's not in the box, so I don't think it's related to the club night.
And she's now got married.
5 days after I had this dream, but I didn't know the date at the time. But maybe I did. Maybe deep down, who knows?
And so, what was the feeling while you were having the dream?
Hard to tell. I can't quite remember. Because it was the 11th of April. I've written here. So she's right. I say to her, I'm so into you. She shows me a video of her on a night out in Box. I realize it's from after we broke up, so I stopped watching as I feel it'll sadden me. Box is a nightclub that I briefly worked in and used to drinking quite a lot in my early 20s. And it was from it's like Thompson's Garage in town, where it's sort of like a little bit trashy, but you kind of enjoy the trashiness of it.
Do you know what I think?
Wow.
She's gone.
She's gone.
That's it. It's just like that relationship possible. I don't know. You
Maybe.
feel well. It's like you had you learned a lot. You grew together. It was the end of the relationship. Remember they say season, reason, lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Your relationship's gone.
Yes.
The relationship, but I don't know, maybe because it wasn't a conscious thing. It's all your subconscious.
No, it's not. I've always thought, since she's a recurring character, I've always interpreted her as my anima, which is which in Jungian terms, it's the female in the male.
Yes.
So it's I always saw her as a female aspect of me, and often whenever in Jungian theory, whenever you're like super crushing on someone, when you're like infatuated with someone, it's a projection of the anima that you're falling in love with your feminine aspects in another person. And
in spirituality, they would talk about twin flames, so the number 2 twin flame. But you have a lot of soulmates, things like that. But they'd say the twin flame is a person who really is there, who is reflection of you in many ways. So yeah, there's a lot of information. Very important character in your development. Very important character in your growth. And it was like Shine. And I would say that with the Shine 2011, it was actually the end of that relationship when you began to be your true self. I don't know.
Maybe I think there was definitely growth after it.
Yeah.
But can I tell you what I wrote down as an interpretation? I think it's quite underdeveloped anyway, what I wrote.
Yes,
so I think I want to add what you've added onto it. So I wrote, some sort of knowledge, brackets, all-seeing eye, is being offered to me, and I am not yet ready to see, because at the end of the video, she tries to show me a video of her on a night out in Box, and I realize it's from after we broke up, so I stopped watching as I feel it'll sadden me. So I feel like that. Some knowledge is being offered to me, and I'm not ready to see. It's from a time when there was an overcompensation of masculinity, aka break up with a female figure. I fear it'll sadden me. It's something depressing. Anima, as I often interpret Patricia to be in my dreams, is often the messenger between the psyche and the collective unconscious. McDonald's and 2p I associate with cheap. I was just me trying to find something through association. I wonder. Right, so I wonder if this is another work dream that I've been experiencing, a lack of love towards an aspect of my work recently that I'm meant to feel love for.
Right. The all-seeing eye, the eye is in terms of chakras, it's your third eye.
Yeah, pineal
which
gland
is
and all that.
going to be intuition,
Uh-huh.
wisdom,
Uh-huh.
knowledge. You love wisdom. You
Yeah,
love knowledge.
I do.
You enjoy it.
Love a good bit
Well,
of that.
that's why we're doing therapy geeks, because
Uh-huh.
we're geeks,
Uh-huh.
right? It's saying I think one of the things is like you're ready to learn, you're ready to go further in
Mm-hmm.
your, well, sure, PhD
Mm-hmm.
thing that, going deeper into the learning,
Yeah.
which is where you're resistant because you're like, fuck that, I've paid enough on this crap now. There's a resistance to
Yeah,
actually going further in your academic, or you don't even have to do it academically,
Uh-huh.
but it's like, the all CNI is big. It comes up a lot for me too, because it's like you're thirsty for wisdom and knowledge, but you're like, I'm so into you, I want this bit, and then she's like, well, this is where you should be going, and you're like, no, I don't want to, because I've paid enough and they won't give me that free EMDR course.
I know.
You see?
Here, do you know? Can I tell you something that might flip the entire dream over that I completely forgot to mention?
Oh God!
It might flip every
This is the
interpretation that
end
we've
of my
both
dream
made.
interpretation.
No, you're doing great. I think that's fantastic, actually.
I love it.
But what I'm about to say was flip both our interpretations completely around. Is I just remembered the 11th of April it's the day before I was meant to move out of my house, because I'm about to move in with my girlfriend.
Oh,
So
ending, new beginnings.
right,
Endings,
exactly, and
new
I'll be learning
beginnings.
something about myself.
Love it.
And I don't know, but it completely flips the script on that whole thing.
No,
Why did I not think of that the first time? It was crazy. But there's definitely a lot there, isn't there? It's so dense. And then there's other dreams where it's like 2 lines and there's fucking nothing I can do with it. But like that, it's cool, isn't it?
oh, I love it. I love it. So I'm just we're over an hour.
Oh yeah, shit. I had so much stuff written on my hand about the relationship,
that
but we'll
one-
never get.
Well,
Could be a 2-parter.
we could do. Well, there's so much you can cover in this.
Yeah, it's quite broad.
So, thank you very much for.
Thank you,
Thank you.
and thank you, listener,
Oh yeah, thank you, listener.
for listening.
Yeah, and if you have anything you want to ask us, ask
Yes,
us.
ask if you got a dream. Keep it to yourself. No, I don't know.
And share, and feedback is very welcome. And we had some lovely feedback, which is really just,
we're really grateful for you, because it's just really just nice. You feel like a small dedicated following is just like a family.
a nice family.
Yeah. Therapy Geeks family.
Therapy Geeks.
Therapy Geeks.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Therapy Geeks. Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Deezer, Listen Notes, Stitcher, Podcast Index, and Buzzsprout. Give us a like or a follow or a subscription, whatever your podcast app allows. Thanks for listening.